President Obama uses congressional authorization he has sought to repeal to justify not asking Congress for permission to go to a war that may not even be a war. What? We'll explain it all. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. We begin tonight with two major questions concerning the president's plan to deal with ISIS terrorists. One, does the president have the authority to act without congressional approval? Two, is it a war? And does that matter? Senior White House Foreign Affairs correspondent Wendell Goler takes a look in tonight's top story.
Pushed by the execution of 2 American journalists and decisive victories against the Iraqi army, President Obama has launched military action against ISIS or ISIL fighters that his advisors hope isn't compared at home or abroad to the war in Iraq.
This is not the Iraq war of 2002. But make no mistake, we know we are at war with ISIL in the same way we're at war and continue to be at war with al-Qaeda and its affiliates.
In the Middle East, Secretary of State Kerry is trying to enlist allies for what he said yesterday isn't properly called a war at all, against what the CIA says are now between 20 and 30,000 ISIS fighters in Syria and Iraq. Arizona Senator John McCain was bitterly sarcastic.
This is just like John Kerry when the president said he was going to attack Syria in response to the chemical weapons issue and said, and John Kerry, the exact words, that the attack would be, quote, unbelievably small.
Meanwhile, the president's aides say his authority to use force is the 2001 authorization for attacks on al-Qaeda, which in a speech at National Defense University last year, Mr. Obama said should be repealed.
Our systematic effort to dismantle terrorist organizations must continue. But this war, like all wars, must end.
The president wants Congress to approve money to train and equip moderate Syrian rebels, but not to take a vote to authorize airstrikes in that country that could alienate liberal voters and cost Democrats control of the Senate in the fall. Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins feels the airstrikes in Syria may go beyond his current authority.
That could constitute an act of war, rather than just being a limited counterterrorism effort.
One compromise might be for Congress to authorize the money to train and equip Syrian rebels now and take the vote on war authority after the fall elections.
I think at some point in time, when we come back after the elections, I think there will be a consideration of a larger authorization for the use of force.
The president is naming retired Marine General John Allen to coordinate the international fight against ISIS, and next week he'll visit Central Command in Tampa, headquarters of the U.S. military group that will oversee the effort. Brett?
Wendell Goler live on the North Lawn. Wendell, thank you. Let's take a deeper dive now into what exactly the president is getting the U.S. military into. Correspondent Doug McKelway has that part of the story.
Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign, unlike any other we have ever seen.
13 years later, President Bush's warning has proved prescient.
It will take time to eradicate a cancer like ISIL.
On the cusp of yet another anti-terror campaign, the Pentagon today emphasized that U.S. air power will be but one tool in the effort to defeat ISIS.
It's going to require partners on the ground to take back and hold the territory that this group has tried to obtain and maintain. It also is going to take the ultimate destruction of their ideology.
But critics say success of the president's plan hinges on something else.
He has to convince people about his own conviction and determination to destroy ISIS.
With his earlier withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq, his plan to withdraw from Afghanistan by this year's end, and his exit from Libya, the president has demonstrated, as critics say, a fear of long-term military commitment. The drone attacks in Somalia and Yemen he cites as successes are of a smaller scale.
It's like comparing a Little League team to the New York Yankees.
There are other risks. Syria has a sophisticated air defense system. And how will Iraqi soldiers fight? The administration believes the new inclusive government there may stiffen soldiers' spines.
But what's really going to be the deciding factor is getting rid of the political hacks that used to be the officer corps. They were the Maliki followers and fellow travelers. Once you start to put competent people back in charge, that will do more for morale.
Restrictive rules of engagement may also limit U.S. effectiveness. Nash says he's heard that they're as strict as anywhere in the world, including Afghanistan. The biggest question of all is, even if ISIS is decimated in Syria, who fills the void? Bashar al-Assad, backed by Hezbollah in Lebanon and by Putin in Russia, would remain in power. And moderate rebels that the U.S. now wants to arm may grow to be as malignant as the cancer we want to excise. Brett?
Doug McKelway at the Pentagon. Doug, thank you. Let's get some analysis now of the president's ISIS strategy. Joining us tonight is retired Marine Corps General Anthony Zinni, former Central Command chief. He's also the author of a new book, Before the First Shots Are Fired. The general comes to us tonight from Williamsburg, Virginia. General, thanks for being here. Your assessment,
with you,
General, of what you're hearing so far about this strategy and what lies ahead.
I guess the most confusing part to me is when the president said we would lead this effort, but all the things that he mentioned were supporting tasks. The air that we provide, the intelligence, the advisors, the equipping. So I'm unclear who is going to have operational control of this. Is it U.S. Central Command? Is General Austin going to be on the ground? Or are we going to have a team that will control the Iraqis, the Peshmerga? That all has to be coordinated. I don't see how we can end up in this fight with perhaps an Iraqi military command. Are they really ready to take that on with us in support of them? So the command and control is my first concern. Secondly, I think this can't be a short campaign, because beside getting ISIS out of Iraq and hitting the sanctuary that's in Syria, you're going to have to build up the Iraqi military, the Syrian moderate resistors, to be able to hold them and prevent them from resurging and coming back. So what is our role in the long term in all this? So I think there's a lot of questions as to how this plays out on the ground. And in fact, the devil's always in the detail.
Yeah, speaking on the ground, this administration, this president, obviously reticent to talk about boots on the ground, in fact saying there won't be U.S. boots on the ground. But let's be honest, there have to be some boots on the ground somewhere to help with these forces and direct these airstrikes. Is that not true?
That's absolutely true. I mean, I've advocated putting some U.S. brigades on the ground from the beginning. ISIS has been in there now 3 months, and they still control Mosul and other parts of Iraq. They're going to be tough to root out. And if you want coalition partners on the ground, the backbone has to be U.S. forces. I think this sort of paranoia about having boots on the ground and then even defining what that means has clouded this whole issue and made it confusing, and I think could hurt us down the road in really getting coalition partners who will share the burden and pony up in terms of putting combat forces in.
Talk to us about Syria and specifically the challenges there. If the U.S. goes forward with Syrian airstrikes, as the president says he's going to take out ISIS inside Syria, doesn't that provide additional problems in that we've heard a lot about Syrian air defenses? Won't there have to be some interaction with the Assad regime to be able to ensure that those jets can get through to drop the bombs in those places?
Well, I would remind you that Israel managed to get through and didn't get a response from Syria. I think that you issue a démarche and make sure they understand that any air defense units that engage our planes will lead to their destruction, and maybe strikes that might go downtown Damascus. I don't see us coordinating with Syria. I don't think we will send sorties into harm's way without all the suppression and protection necessary just to make sure that their air defense systems don't get adventurous.
You've been in the region and dealt with that region a lot. What is your assessment of this ISIS force? The CIA putting out these new numbers, 20,000 to 31,500 fighters, up 10,000 in just recent weeks and months. What's your thought about them?
Well, I think a couple of things are happening. They've been, as I said, in Iraq for 3 months. You can bet some of the Sunni areas that they've taken over, they've done some recruiting, maybe more coercive, so their numbers swell. Their ability to propagandize what they do have attracted radicals from all over the world. So I'm not surprised to see the numbers growing. It may not be just a matter of more intelligence focus and getting the numbers right. It may be that the time they've been given to nest in these places and promote their propaganda are actually increasing their ranks.
Since the president spoke the other night, we have seen an evolution of the term war. Take a quick listen to this and tell me whether it matters.
Is the United States at war with ISIS? It sure sounds from the president's speech that we are.
I think that's the wrong terminology. What we are doing is engaging in a very significant counterterrorism operation.
It sounds like a war to me. Is it fair to call it a war?
Well, Wolf, I don't know whether you want to call it a war or a sustained counterterrorism campaign, or I think, frankly, this is a counterterrorism operation that will take time.
In the same way that we are at war with Al-Qaeda and its affiliates around the globe, we are at war with ISIL.
Does that matter, General, what they call it?
It certainly matters to the troops on the ground. You know, my brother served in Korea. Truman called it a police action. My brother could have told you that it felt like a war down where he was in the trenches. I was in Vietnam and Somalia and other places, and you know, it is a war. They have invaded another country. We have to not only get rid of them, but we've committed to destroying them and taking the fight into another nation in terms of Syria. And probably this will metastasize into other parts of the region. So if it's not a war, I can't imagine what it is. This isn't simply a counterterrorism measure. We are going to be involved in some conventional fighting here. So I don't know what the hang-up is unless there's some legal ramifications of calling it what it is. It's a war.
Last thing quickly, General. You are openly critical of the Bush administration and their strategy in Iraq. As you look at this now, is there an end game that you see, or are you concerned about it?
Well, it's difficult to define the end game because, as we saw by missing our opportunity to get Al-Qaeda at the beginning in Afghanistan, it metastasized. And it started to sprout up with different names, Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab or all these other places that it came up. It will continue to sprout like this all over. So I think this is a long-term campaign against extremism that we're going to find ourselves in many parts of the world still fighting this. And the important point here is to build the kind of international support and burden sharing to deal with this. I'm shocked that we haven't gotten a resolution out of the UN authorizing the use of force and condemning formally in a resolution ISIS. Remember President Bush, H.W. Bush, when we went in to take Saddam out of Kuwait, the first thing we did is get a UN resolution, the authorization, which I can tell you allowed many nations to join the coalition and gave them cover. That should be one of the first orders of business.
General Anthony Zinni, thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you, Brett.
Up next, playing politics with immigration reform and getting caught. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 8 in Cleveland with the escape and recapture of convicted school shooter T.J. Lane. The 19-year-old and two others scaled a fence and got out of the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution. They were caught a few hours later. Lane killed 3 high school classmates and wounded 3 others in 2012. And this is a wet look at Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From Fox 6, our affiliate there, the big story there tonight, a federal appeals court has reinstated Wisconsin's voter identification law. The 7th Circuit issued a ruling late Friday afternoon lifting Alderman's stay and allowing the law to go into effect before the November elections. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. From a special report, we'll be right back.